folks who are joining in, we'll just give it a minute for more people to come in, and then we'll begin the session.
Shall we get going, Anusha?
Sure. Okay, for those who are joining in, hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this session by xto10x, where we will talk about a topic that has of late garnered a lot of attention in the Indian startup ecosystem, OKRs. My name is Anusha, and I lead the OKR practice at xto10x. Few years ago, having OKRs as a goal setting and governance philosophy was a Silicon Valley topic. Over the last 2 years, we at xto10x spoke to over 275 startup founders in India, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, and realized that the need for an effective governance system for running the company well is one of the common themes that founders struggle with. Having implemented OKRs at our own companies like Flipkart and CureFit, we knew the power of OKRs. Hence, in our mission to help startups in their scaling up journey, we at xto10x even launched a practice that dedicatedly helps companies in installing the OKR process. After having worked with over 120 startups in launching OKRs, we feel that there is a playbook to getting OKRs right. This series of webinars is actually an attempt to demystify OKRs for you and make it very easy and practical. And who better than founders who have implemented this at their own companies to share insights? On that note, I will welcome Manish Taneja, who is the co-founder and CEO of Purple, joining us for a chat with Neeraj Agarwal, who is the co-founder and COO of xto10x, to discuss what it really takes to get your OKR implementation right. Neeraj has been personally involved in launching OKRs at over 75 startups via xto10x. Purple as an organization was launched in 2011 and is a growing e-beauty destination that has 7 million monthly active users, 70,000 products from 1,200 brands. From an e-commerce platform, Purple has expanded to house multiple private D2C brands and has a strong online and offline presence. They also recently turned unicorn in June of this year amidst a tough funding winter. Folks, for your reference, Purple is one of the companies which has deployed OKRs and made it real for their teams. I would like to thank Manish for spending time with us today. And we hope as listeners, you would get a glimpse of Purple's journey with OKRs. I'm sure the discussion would be a power-packed one, and hence one request to the audience, please feel free to put in your questions or comments on the Q&A section. We will try to address most of them towards the end of the session. With this, I would like to hand over the session to Neeraj and Manish, and I'm looking forward to an engaging 1 hour filled with power-packed and rich insights. Over to you, Neeraj.
Thank you so much, Anusha. Manish, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and joining us today for this webinar. It's talking to you and interacting with you, something that I always look forward to. So super excited about the next 1 hour with you, Manish.
No, likewise. Thank you, Anusha, and thank you, Neeraj. Yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. Before I start my set of questions for you, Manish, that we've laid out for you to share your experiences and insights in OKRs, I also want to set some more context apart from what Anusha just said for everybody who joined us today. In our own operating journeys, we personally experience the power of OKRs in helping run companies and teams really, really well. We realized that there were several frameworks out there, but this is probably the one framework that married a lot of issues that people were grappling with at that point in time. And so we became extremely passionate about this particular topic of OKRs and implementing it well in companies. One of the things that we also realized when we started talking to companies, when we started xto10x, was that either people had not heard about OKRs or people who had heard about OKRs had extremely negative perception of OKRs. People seem to say that it's probably a framework meant for large, stable companies. It's a framework that's too heavy for an early stage startup like me. people started saying that we've heard there are too many practical challenges in implementing a theoretical framework like OKRs. And a lot of people also said that, you know what, I've tried OKRs in the past and it was a complete failure for my, in my context. So I'm not sure I want to do it again. So what we've tried to do over the last 3-4 years is really make it a mission for xto10x to spread the word about OKRs and to also make it fairly simple for companies to be able to implement OKRs well, because we've seen the power of this framework in a scaling environment where there's a lot happening around you. A framework like this can go a long way in making your journey of scaling really efficient and very simple. And in that context, we're all here today. And Manish, you and Purple have been at the forefront of driving OKRs. You've been a power user of OKRs over the last 12 months. So your insights and experiences are going to be really helpful today for a lot of the people who've joined us for this webinar. So again, thank you so much, my friend, for joining us today for this session. Okay. On that note, my first question for you, Manish. You started on the journey of OKRs about 12 months ago. You've been using OKRs quite heavily as a company about 12 months ago. But Purple itself has been around for a fairly long time. So first question to you is, what was the governance framework used in Purple before you started thinking about OKRs? In fact, for 10, 11 years, you ran the company without OKRs. So what was the governance framework that you used at that point in time? And secondly, what drove the need for exploring something like an OKR framework for running the company? So over to you.
Sure. So as a quick background to Purple, I would say we were a pretty tiny company till 2019 or so. I think we had very few leaders within the firm at that point in time, and the 3 founders used to be very actively involved in running different parts of the business. I used to run sales and marketing, Suyash used to run tech and product, and Rahul used to run ops and customer service. Yeah. And so between the 3 of us and maybe 1 or 2 more people, we could sort of get all decision making, all solutioning, all resources allocation done quite easily. And so, I frankly don't remember how we did it, but basically it was just 3 of us sharing Excel sheets on Google Drive. What started to happen from 2020 onwards is that the company started to get really large. And also, I think COVID helped us in our adoption of OKRs because now everybody was remote, so you couldn't meet very quickly in office huddle and get things done. And so our first brush with OKRs was in OND quarter of 2020. Yeah. So I think we failed miserably in that quarter from our own expectations point of view. So I think the team got really, I think the team had like reservations on, getting one more tool to sort of use. And so we paused in Q1 of next year, perhaps 2021. And then like middle of 2021 towards the end of 2021, I picked it up again with xto10x, and we went live, I think, in Jan, Feb, March of 2022 as our first, or maybe like last year. I think it's OND last year probably. So that's been our journey. This time when we were taking it up, we knew that we will not give up on it. We had given up on it once. And now the company is pretty large. I mean, I think in terms of number of people, we are probably, I don't remember exactly, but we are probably 12 times the number of people we were in 2019. Overall, we are about 3,100 people as a group, including people who are not on our payroll, but on contract. And so the firm has grown from like 250 people to about 3,100 people and all. And so we felt like, this time we really needed a good governance framework and tool to sort of manage things. Otherwise, I think too many things were going out of control all the time. And And there was no one place or one way in which everybody was sort of looking at things. And also what happens is, as you get lots of leaders within the firm, because as I said, until 2019, it was like 3 of us plus maybe 3-4 more people. Now that you have, let's say, 30 such people and not 3-4 such people, everybody has different ideas on how they want to go about the growth of the firm and various other aspects of the firm. And there needs to be like one strategy. There can't be multiple strategies, because then people don't even know what strategy you're pursuing. And so we badly wanted to go back to OKRs and use it as a tool to implement that one strategy that we would have. And hence sort of we came back to OKRs in, I think, OND last year, October, November, December last year. And since then we haven't looked back.
Excellent. You said it's been about 12 months now, OND of last year. Obviously the size of the company was much smaller earlier compared to what it is right now. But how has life changed for the company post OKR? What's the big difference you've seen in the company post OKR world versus the pre OKR world?
I think there are 3 or 4 big changes that I see in the company pre versus post. I think pre OKR world, we used to talk too much about outcomes. Now we talk much more about inputs or initiatives, as we call it. Outcomes are just a matter of how many initiatives you take and do you have enough resources to drive those initiatives or not. I think second change that has happened is everyone in the leadership team, I would say top 20, 25, 30 people are all aware on a weekly basis on our progress against our milestones. And so I think everyone gets like a ringside view of what's happening versus only a select few people having a view of things. I think third, what has changed is resource planning has become much, much better. Typically people will, because we are, I think, a very tech first company, people had lots of demands of product and tech team. And if I look back at many of our documents of 2019 and 2020, there used to be projects that used to run like 4 quarters delayed in a small company like ours. Today that probably delay has been reduced to like a 45-day delay from desired timeline. And ideally, we would like to finish it in the same quarter, but sometimes I feel still like, something that was supposed to end in June might end in like July or early August. But that's probably the maximum amount of delay. So I think the firm has become better at predicting what it can do and what it can't do in the next 90 to 100 days. Everyone has a ringside view of what's happening across many parameters in the firm. And now, because we've been using it, there is one strategy that everyone is forced to pursue. And so everyone looks at the same tool every week, every Thursday. And people sort of don't digress into doing random multiple things. Look, there is nothing wrong in strategy A or strategy B or strategy C. It's just that as a firm, when you're like a largish firm, or even when you're a small firm, I don't think it differs. I mean, I wish we would have used OKRs in 2015 and not in 2020. But I think you need to just have one strategy and everybody needs to follow it. And, as humans, typically we have this tendency to, there's this typical tendency that most humans have is once you face a bottleneck, you try to sort of evade it and you move to some other problem. I think OKR makes it very explicit. It's documented as to what you said in Q1 and what did you do. And so, you stay at the problem and don't sort of dodge the problem and go to some other problem. You basically go ahead and solve that problem instead of sort of evading problems. And that is another benefit that I've seen, just this, I would say, proper documented governance framework due to purple.
Excellent. You brought up some very interesting points. Manish, you mentioned the fact that engineering and your tech and product projects used to sort of get delayed by three, four quarters sometimes. one of the things that we've observed, one of the teams that actually benefits the most from a process like OKR, which actually forces all business teams to plan at the start of the quarter, is the tech and product team.
Yes.
Because now that you start planning for it at the start of the quarter as a business leader, you call out your expectations from tech and product at the start of the quarter, and that allows the tech and product teams to also allocate resources accordingly, and even set expectations accordingly, depending on how much they can do and how much they cannot do. In the absence of OKR, what we found is that the typical tendency for business leaders is to walk into the tech and product team and say, you know what, I want this feature, and can you please get it done for me over the next couple of weeks? And that leads to a lot of strain, a lot of pressure, a lot of ad hoc sort of work. But this is one of the big advantages of using a framework like OKR, that forces people to plan ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Excellent. You also said a little bit about the fact that your first brush at OKRs was a failure in 2020. It's something that it's something that we see all the time, Manish, that 90% of the people who try OKRs actually fail the first time around. As you look back, what do you think went wrong? And what do you think were the big reasons for it failing the first time around? And how did you sort of overcome those issues the second time you decided to do it?
Yeah. I think I think there are internal and external reasons of why the first stint with OKRs didn't work out for us. I think the internal reason was, lots of new people had joined the team very recently, and the belief in OKRs was a little bit lower. People felt it is one more sort of framework of governing the company. Why do you need it? Why can't you have like weekly presentations or some, usual way of doing things? And I think as founders, we failed at sort of keeping people convinced about it. I think the external reason was, we started OKRs in October of 2020, and we were coming off a big, high in our revenues in August, September, when COVID was receding. And so our planning for O&D quarter went horribly wrong. And instead of sort of blaming instead of looking at our, inputs, I think we sort of blamed the tool, so, and what happened is, if you go like horribly wrong on your planning, like if you plan to do X kind of growth, but if you do X by 2, then the team felt a little bit disheartened, and you basically threw the baby out of the bathwater instead of fixing it. So I think that was our stint. I think it was both internal and partly the environment we were in. When we were first time implementing in was just very volatile for us to, that's one of the reasons. I'm not trying to say that you should not implement OKRs if the environment is volatile. You should actually implement it all the more if the environment is volatile, because then you can have weekly check-ins on what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think it was just, I think there was lots of tailwind, which in August, September, which quickly receded in O&D. And I think we lost a little bit of, I would say, we got a little bit demotivated in that process, and we had to sort of recoup our energies and get back by middle of next year. Understood.
You also spoke a little bit about the fact that you wish that you'd started OKRs much earlier.
Yeah.
I can actually say this from experience. I've been in a setup where we first started OKRs when we had about 5,000 people in the company, which was Flipkart. And then I was also in a company where we started OKRs when we were 35 people strong. We used to work at a very small home converted into an office. Everybody could see each other. Everybody could sort of call out to each other and get things done. But we still used OKRs and started OKRs at that stage in our evolution. And I dare say that it was one of the big reasons for the phenomenal success of the company, because it brought in a certain amount of diligence and planning rigor to the company that really helped in our execution after that. So I agree. I couldn't agree more with you, Manish, that OKRs is a framework that is best sort of started very, very early in the journey.
And then you started OKRs at xto10x when you were 3 people.
We started OKRs at xto10x when we were 3 people, just the 3 co-founders. And we
Yes.
believe very deeply in the power of this framework. I mean, obviously, in the early stages of the company, there is a lot of change happening on a day-to-day basis. OKRs go through a lot of change. But OKR also make it very clear to you in terms of what needs to change, which is why we sort of started very early on. Okay, I have a poll for our audience at this stage. Sonali, if you can please put the poll up. Yeah. Excellent. So we have about 60% of the respondents telling us that they have actually tried OKRs in their organization. I have a follow-up question to this, given the fact that so many of you have tried OKRs. Sonali, if you don't mind, can you please, yeah, have you been successful at using OKRs effectively in the company? Excellent. So pretty much what we see otherwise also, pretty much what we see in the ecosystem, at least now the last 2-3 years, there is a lot of awareness about this process. But even now we realize, and we've seen in company after company, that people get it wrong. The first time around is a complete failure that sort of destroys confidence in the OKR process. The fault, of course, lies somewhere else, which is in the way we go about implementing OKRs. On that note, thank you so much, all of you, for responding to the two polls. Manish, for you now, my next question for you is, what would be the top 2-3 things that you think, having now seen both sides of the fence, the time when you failed at OKRs and the time when OKRs actually succeeded really well in the company over the last 12 months? What are the top 2-3 things that you think are absolute must-haves to successfully launch OKRs or successfully have implemented OKRs in your company?
Yeah. I would say the first thing is having one, like, just practically implementing OKRs is a fair bit of exercise in itself. And so I think having one OKR champion in the company is, I think, a must-have. Otherwise, like many things, these things fall through the crack. People will not update the tool. People will not, people will have some excuse or the other of why they are not following it. And so since last year, which is OND last year, we had one of our founding, one of the persons who actually reported to the founders as founder staff, she used to run it for Purple. Now we have an even senior person who runs it for Purple. He's our chief of staff, and so I think the first and probably the very important answer to that is, have somebody lead this dedicatedly, because people will make, there are lots of places where it will go wrong. I think one, people will probably not update. People will not write the right OKRs. Sometimes people will confuse between outcomes and initiatives and KRs. So I think just somebody I think somebody just owning this process every week is very important. I think the second important reason for success is, or I think second important trait for success is, I think, just the leadership team's belief in it. Like, this is how we want to see it. We don't want to see any other document that you may present. And I think third way you can make it very successful in your company, and some teams at Purple use it like that and some others don't, is you make OKRs as your only review mechanism. So it's not like the founders want to review the company using OKRs. Let's say if you are VP engineering and you want to review the company, you want to review engineering team's performance, you also use OKRs to review it. If you are And don't use any other Excel sheets, or, as much as possible, avoid using multiple things, because otherwise people will have to update multiple places, and that sort of becomes like additional work. And so as much as possible, I think use OKR as like the primary tool of knowing everything that's going on in the company. So, just to summarize, I think one, have an OKR champion who is very senior and has reasonable authority in the firm. I think second would be just the leadership's belief in the process. And I would say third is use it as your primary tool of review across the board and not just for the leadership team. Then, by default, this doesn't become an additional exercise, but it's just part of how you do your governance in your specific team every day.
Excellent. All outstanding points, Manish. I know you've been blessed, Manish, because your OKR champions, both your OKR champions, the one that you started this process with, and of course, the person who runs it now, have been outstanding people. But you made very good points that the OKR person is somebody who must understand the business context very well.
Yes.
Must have the persona to be able to influence the leadership team. And so obviously can't be somebody very, very junior. Must be somebody who, for the first 2 quarters at least, makes it 50 to 60% of his responsibility, his or her responsibility.
Yes.
To stabilize and launch the process inside the company.
Yes.
Many a time, in too many cases, we've seen that founders take this on as a personal responsibility, which is a big mistake, because this is a massive change management exercise. It requires you to not just launch the process and say you're behind it, but it actually requires you to work with different teams and help them craft the right OKRs for them and help them with the brainstorming of what sort of OKRs they should take and what sort of KRs they should break their OKRs, their objectives into. So it requires dedicated time, effort, capacity, and context to the company, which are all the makings of a good OKR champion. And I know you've really got the OKR champion persona absolutely spot on in your company, Manish. The second point that you made about leadership conviction, again, I couldn't underline it more, except that I would say one more thing. It starts with the founder's conviction. If the founders are completely convinced, and again, take as much time as it takes. Have 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, you read the number of books that you want to read, talk to as many founders as you want to talk to, but start this process not as an experiment, but as something that you're going to throw your weight behind for the next 3, 4, 5 quarters. The minute people realize this is yet another experiment in the company, people don't adopt to the change, because it is a complex and a time-consuming process. So founders' conviction followed by leadership conviction, I think, are absolutely critical. If teams realize that my leaders are not fully bought in, then frankly, teams are not going to spend the time and effort in adopting the process themselves. It's very important for founders and leaders to have deep conviction. You also spoke of the fact that make it the only review forum in the company for different sort of teams. Again, great point. Please do not add to the review overhead in a company by saying that, continue your normal reviews and we'll add the OK review on top of that. Try and see how you can deprecate some of the other review forums in the company and replace them with the OK reviews in various teams. So all outstanding points, Manish.
There are some more, I would say, best practices that, one could follow to make it successful. I think, given that OKR review meeting is like a broad meeting where lots of people attend, I would say it's mostly to know where we are on things and not necessarily to delve deep into why some initiatives haven't gone live on time. But I think typically I would say 2 days before the OKR review, different teams should have, I would call them as working meetings or something, where they also figure out if there are some solutions which are on track or initiatives on track. There are some initiatives which have gone off track but can be brought on track. And then there are some new problems that they are faced with, which, probably need either new solutioning or it needs leadership teams alignment on certain things. So I think if you follow this, I would say rigorously, which is, let's say if your OKR review meeting is on Tuesday and different team leads do this meeting with their teams if your OKR meeting is on Thursday and different team leads do it on Tuesday, then I think, you get into that weekly rigor and it works out quite well. If you use OKR meeting as a meeting to in detail debate things and so on and so forth, then I just think it can get very long. It does happen sometimes at Purple that our OKR meetings also become 2 hours long. And that is primarily because I think the previous meetings haven't, the working meetings haven't happened, and hence,
Yeah.
we typically don't have, like, we have to debate it in the main meeting.
No, absolutely. I think great point. The trick is in actually keeping the OKR meeting as sharp as you can, not let it extend beyond a point. And that essentially means that if there are KRs or OKRs that are not on track, people coming to the meeting, not getting surprised by the fact that a certain KR is off track, but actually coming prepared with the answers of why am I behind track on this particular KR and what am I doing to come back on track. And that requires some pre-work that leaders can do with their respective teams before the OKR meeting at the leadership level. Absolutely brilliant.
And maybe like just one point I would add is, having like if OKRs in your company are running, let's say, to 80% efficiency or 70%. What I mean by that is, let's say 70%, 80% of the people are actually following it really, really well.
Yeah.
I think it's a job well done, because at least on those 70%, 80% people, you don't have to bother about, getting multiple reports and getting somebody to collate them and so on and so forth. You can then delve deeper into the remaining 20, 30% and figure out, how can you solve it there and, use OKRs better there. It's better than not having OKRs at all, because at least 70% of the company then can easily run on autopilot mode where, things can happen on time as pre-agreed before the quarter.
Yeah.
And so you can spend most of your bandwidth on things that are probably going that are not happening on schedule.
And which is another great point, Manish, which is really why we recommend you got to stick to the process for at least 3 quarters, because it takes that kind of time for people to become used to it. The 70-80% mark, if you're able to get to by the end of the 3rd quarter, I think you're in very, very good shape. But that's the reason why it takes 3 quarters for the process to stabilize, because it is time consuming. It takes time for people to adjust to it. But great point. By the way, what is your opinion on have you exposed OKRs, for example, to the entire company? Does everybody in the company, at least in the corporate team, know what are the top OKRs that the company has taken and how we're doing against them?
So not yet. I would say top 10-15% of the people in the firm have access to the OKRs. I think we're in the process of taking it more and more like deeper, but I think there is a level to which you can take it, and after that I think you can probably pause it. Okay. Because let's say if I have somebody who's a picker in my warehouse, or let's say somebody who is he is a customer service agent in my customer service team, I think what he or she is, I would say 99% of the cases, most concerned about is his or her performance, and on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And the way we keep them abreast about company performances, we do town halls every month, and we tell people how did we perform last month and how did their specific function overall perform last month. And that's how we share knowledge and information. But, having access to, full company OKRs might just be distraction and probably not needed. I think their life can run. If there are 1 or 2 parameters that they measure about their performance every day, those can get measured on an Excel sheet as well.
Again, well said. I think teams that are operating teams or teams that are actually defined very sharply by day-to-day sort of KPIs and metrics don't need to be exposed to the OKR framework at all, because OKRs is all about initiatives and big projects being undertaken to sort of shift the trajectory of the company. So those sort of, you don't need to, again, a very important message, Manish, that OKRs do not need to percolate down to the last level in the company. In different teams, up to the point where OKRs are required to be given to be able to drive initiatives, OKRs are actually percolated, but below a certain point in almost every team, those initiatives start becoming tasks, and daily metrics are used to sort of measure those tasks, and that's where the OKR percolation should stop and KPI should take over. Great point. Okay.
I think there are probably one more place where we don't use OKRs is if there is some confidential work we do, which we, let's say some investor conversations that are happening or so and so forth. I think those conversations we keep it out of OKR. I mean, I wish we could keep it on OKR itself and not run it separately, but maybe we'll set up like a private OKR for those conversations. But like, I would just say looking at like having all of it in one place is very, very helpful founder and leadership team point of view, and also probably, as you mentioned, from a product and tech team clarity point of view as to what needs to get done by when and what are the resources available and so on and so forth.
Excellent. You also made a really good point, Manish, where you said that you keep teams abreast of how is the company doing on its overall OKRs and how are individual teams doing on their respective OKRs. You made it like a practice in your town halls. Really, really important to make OKRs not just a leadership governance process, but make OKRs a language in the company, make it a currency in the company. And the only way that's going to happen is if everyone in the company starts talking the language of OKRs, which again, by the way, we've seen companies who implement OKRs well almost talk only in the OKR language. They don't, when you go to a tech and product person saying, do this for me, the first question we throw back at you is, can you show me if it's actually agreed on in the OKR process or not? So yes. Excellent, great point, Manish. I can see we have a lot of questions that have come up. So do you think we should start taking the questions now, Manish?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. How do you know you or your organization is ready for OKRs?
I don't think there is ever you're ready for it. You should go for it as soon as you can. I think if you care about efficiency in your company, if you care about things getting rolled out on time, if you care about, having inputs linked to your outcomes as much as possible, and instead of it being like in people's minds, I think you should go for it as soon as you can. Like, even if you're a 5 people, like maybe, 5 people, you can just discuss this internally, but if you're like a 30 people company, you should just do it.
Well said. I agree. I think, look, my answer to that question is this, that if you're in a company or a setup where there is a tremendous amount of change happening every day, typically pre-product market fit, when you're trying new things almost every second day, and it is very, very hard to plan for the next 3 months also, I think in a setup like that, OKRs wouldn't sort of give you too much of benefit.
I think I would say, Neeraj, us case mein, what you can do is you can do like a monthly OKR.
That's correct.
Yeah. Like you don't need to have quarterly OKRs. You don't need 45 days, 60 days to execute things. Yes. If you think your teams can execute stuff in 14 days, 21 days, you could rather stick to like monthly OKRs.
Monthly OKR, that's a good point. The limited point being that please frame your OKRs for the duration that you think you have some sort of clarity for. If there is too much of change, too much of churn happening, then OKRs may be counterproductive or may not be as helpful as they can be. But like I said, at least in my experience, I've also seen teams starting OKRs very, very early, almost at the start of the company itself, because it's a matter of discipline. It creates a culture of collaboration and sharing information and complete transparency. So to each his own, but I would say at a point where you think that you can start planning for at least 3-4 weeks down the line, then you should start using OKRs in your company. The next question, when is the right stage for the company to launch OKR? Similar questions, so we've already answered that. Currently, understanding around OKR methodology is limited to goal identification, and then comes the performance review process. How do you integrate the two to make it the only review forum? Also, it becomes challenging to cascade to middle management and below. Some insights on how sizable startups 2000 plus solve for it.
Okay. I think lots of questions in this. Could you just repeat, maybe we take first question first and then second one?
How do you integrate the two, which is the OKR process and the performance review process, or make it the only review forum in the company?
I think you make it the only review forum in the company. I don't think we can have too many review forums in the company. So people's performances are linked to OKRs, and that's the only thing we will do. I mean, why do you need to run 2 or 3 different kinds of systems in the company? I think OKR just gives you all historical clarity of what was, decided at the beginning of the year or the quarter. Did things play out well or not? Where did we falter? And so you can actually have an entirely performance management conversation on the back of OKRs itself. I think the only place where performance management conversations are a little bit more than OKRs are 2 places. One is if you want to give people, if you want to, talk to people about, are you following the company values and principles or not? That could happen outside of OKR. Or are you demonstrating the purple values or not? And I think the second place where, you need to have performance management conversations outside of OKRs is, asking people what their ambitions in life are. And, if they are looking to do some other role 1-2 years from now, how could you just plan their movement going forward? But absolutely their own performance review for the last quarter or first half or full year can absolutely happen on the back of just OKRs.
Great point, Manish. Look, any performance review process typically has 2 or 3 inputs. Number one, the actual work that you've delivered for the company against the charter that you had signed up for. 2, the adherence to the values of the company or your peer feedback on those values. And third is, of course, the conversation around what does the next 12, 18 months look like for you and what do you need to sort of develop as a person on. So I think OKRs form, at least for the people who are in the OKR process, there is no reason to not use that as their performance in the OKRs as a critical input to the performance management process. If OKRs are everything that the company deems as important,
Yeah,
and if people are spending time trying to deliver those results, then there is no reason why OKR should not be integrated to your performance review process. Obviously, different OKRs are of different types. For example, there are OKRs that are solutioning in nature, which means they're extremely 0 to 1 in nature. There are too many unknowns. You don't give the same treatment to that sort of an OKR versus, let's say, a commitment OKR where the inputs are very, very clearly known. It's a very well-established part of the company, and you obviously have no room for failure in a case like that. So it's important to tag OKR as solutioning, commitment, or aspirational, and use those tags to decide how much of that will actually flow into your performance management process, or what are the weightage that you will give in your performance management process. But super critical to feed OKRs in the performance.
but even the 0 to 1 projects, and maybe somebody would ask that question, is I would say even 0 to 1 projects should have milestones.
Yeah.
And I think you need not have a 0 to 1 project that impacts your performance in the same quarter. You can have a 0 to 1 project that is like a preparation project for next quarter. So you could have a preparation OKRs where you'll say, by the end of this quarter, I will figure out these things. And therefore it will play in the next quarter in terms of, improving the growth of the company or so and so forth. So I think you can always put 0 to 1 projects in the OKR as preparation OKRs, and you should have some milestones on it. I mean, you can't have like no milestones on a 0 to 1 project OKR as well.
That's correct. Excellent. The next part of that question reads as, it becomes challenging to cascade to middle management and below. Some insights on how sizable startups solve for it. And I think you answered this sometime back. We spoke about this a little while back, which is that it doesn't need to get translated into OKRs for everybody in the company. You don't need to take it down to a level where everybody in the company is on OKRs. Below the level of people who are actually taking on initiatives that are responsible for projects, people who are executing day-to-day tasks, whether it is engineering, the SD1s, SD2s who are actually measured sprint by sprint, or whether it is the operating folks on the ground, to that layer of people, you really don't need to take OKRs down because you have KPIs and metrics to sort of measure them. They should stop at the level where initiatives and projects can be defined and not below that. So that is our simple answer. So regardless of size, that's how you should think about OKRs.
Yeah.
Is OKRs, Diksha, thank you so much for that question. Very, 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 very helpful question. The next question is OKRs a top-down or bottoms-up initiative? How do we get user buy-in during implementation?
I think OKRs are top-down. As a company, you decide on what kind of growth you want to do over the next 2-3 years or 1 year. And so as a group, you decide on what is acceptable from a performance point of view. And then you sort of, once you have that as a goalpost, then you sort of start doing the work of bottoms up. And but I think it starts top down. I mean, there is a certain level of performance that you expect your firm to deliver, and it's not just the founders but the leadership team. Everybody is incentivized to deliver a certain performance, and I think that just comes top down. I mean, below a certain level of performance, you probably would not like to deliver, and so I think you agree on that milestone, and then you sort of start backtracking on how bottoms up you can achieve it. It needs to be reasonable. It cannot be extremely unreasonable. But at the same time, it can't be just bottoms up, because then bottoms up will not include, efficiencies that you will bring in over a period of time. And bottoms up thinking, the worry with bottoms up thinking sometimes in life is it's very short term. So, you look at your last 6 months of performance and basis that you come up with what you can do in the next 1 quarter or like 4 quarters. But if you actually want to really use bottoms up thinking, you could probably look at your trajectory over the last 2-3 years and see how that has played out, and then probably take, OKRs, or it could actually very well be just top down.
Let me add to that a little bit as well, Manish, which is, look, one of the big reasons you adopt OKRs also is to clarify to everybody in the company in terms of what are the most important 4 or 5 areas or 4 or 5 objectives the company is trying to chase down. It's very important to set clarity for the entire company and to tell them that over the course of the next 12 months, here is where we want to get to on these 4 or 5 dimensions. And that obviously that framing or that ambition setting is top down. Now, the bottom-up process will expose to you whether you've got the resources, whether the ambition that you set out for the company are too out of whack, or whether there is some sort of semblance of sanity in those ambitions. That's where the bottom-up process really helps, and that's how the process works. You set the ambitions top down, and then of course the KR starts sort of getting framed, and that's when you realize whether there is a mismatch between the ambition and the resources that you've got available or not. So it's a top-down process from an ambition setting standpoint, but a bottom-up process from a what can we realistically achieve, and how much of gap exists between where we are and where we need to be. So that's the power of the bottoms-up sort of exercise. But it starts with the top-down framing of where we want to get to as a collective organization. Thank you so much for whoever asked this question. Very, very powerful question again. The next question is from Neha. The main challenge in implementation of OKRs or with any other process is bandwidth of team leads and reporting managers. How do we get out of this challenge? Because I believe it's very important for them to be taking interest in giving the required time for this. Manish.
As I had mentioned to you earlier, if this becomes the de facto review process in the firm, then it effectively replaces some other place where time was going. And this is not additional time that is being spent. I think there are also many benefits of sometimes forcing people to follow the OKR process is, in OKRs, you start thinking about initiatives a lot more than you start thinking about outcomes. I feel a lot of people spend a lot of time discussing outcomes, but not discussing initiatives. I'm perfectly okay if some initiatives and how do they impact the outcome is not fully clear. In most cases, it is actually quite very clear. I mean, when I look at our initiatives on the operations side, or when I look at our initiatives on sometimes even on people side with ENPS survey, or when I look at our initiatives on customer service side, or when I look at our initiatives on category side, I think things are pretty straightforward. In some cases, let's say you can't really assign how much this initiative will move this outcome. It's still fine. But I think OKRs just force people to think in terms of initiatives and measuring their KRs. But I think, OKR is not additional burden that we are putting on people. If everyone in the company, I would say every leader in the company starts using this as the de facto review process, you just open the OKR tool every Tuesday and look at where it is, then this is not additional burden on anybody.
Again, well said, Manish. Look, Neha, my response to this is also very similar to Manish's, and I'll add one more thing, which is that all OKRs are telling people to do is whatever outcomes you're chasing, please pause a moment and list down the top 4 or 5 things that you will do from an input standpoint, or that you will need from other people in other teams to make that outcome real. So it's not adding a burden. All it's telling you to do is at the start of the quarter, please spend some time planning for how you're going to meet your goals. That's all it does.
Yes.
And if there are people who think of this as additional effort and a burden, then these are people that I would say you should take a very hard look at, because these are people who are then not willing to spend time even planning for the next 3 months in terms of what do they really need from other people around them to get that particular goal met. And there are leaders who are outstanding at planning, and they are the ones who obviously get their execution right. And then there are people who keep trying to wing it, who keep trying to wing it every single time during the middle of a quarter. They are the ones that get exposed in a process like that. So I would say it's not something that people should shy away from. It's absolutely critical to plan well, to execute well. Okay. The next question is from Tarun of M Caffeine. Since one of the key differences pre and post OKRs at Purple was people talking more about initiatives and inputs versus outcomes, how do you measure and stay focused on outcomes? And if the desired outcomes don't come, how do you check for execution?
Yeah, good question. I think Tarun, what I've realized is that outcomes happen for initiatives that you've taken well in the past, or sometimes you get lucky because of tailwinds. There are quarters when we actually put in reasonable amount of initiatives and sometimes we fall short, or I would say slightly short only. But in most cases, I would say if the initiatives are well planned, then you're able to meet your KRs quite well. I don't think that happens. If it does happen that, you couldn't meet your outcome, you absolutely do a post-mortem of why these initiatives couldn't lead to the desired outcome. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we do, which I think is helpful, is that what you're basically looking for is certainty of initiatives to deliver a certain outcome. And so the way I would say OKR should be planned in a company is not 1 quarter in advance, but ideally I would say 2 quarters in advance. So in July, you should prepare for what you want to do in O&D. And therefore, all the preparation projects or OKRs need to happen in the July, August, September quarter. So by the September quarter, you have some proven wins, and only those proven wins will go into the O&D from a OKR planning point of view. In O&D quarter, there'll be some more projects that you will pick up, OKRs as preparation OKRs, which will actually be, certain OKRs that certain projects you will pick up, which are preparation projects for next quarter's OKR. And so by December, you will know which of these have succeeded, which of these have not. And then you sort of go into, your next. So I'll give you an example here. In our product team, we keep working on lots of preparation OKRs for in this quarter for next quarter. The idea is to arrive at which all experiments succeeded at, let's say, 20% A/B test. How much did they succeed? Let's say we are working on a project to improve our conversion rate. There are many things that we can do. Let's say we identify 3 or 4 things. By November end or mid-December, we will prove that, these projects have led to a 7% increase in conversion rate for only 20% of the audience. And then you start gradually scaling it up and you scale it to 95% by December end. And so next quarter, that your conversion rate is going to be broadly 7% higher than what it was last. And so that is what you bake into your next quarter's performance.
Yeah, I think, Tarun, if you find there are parts in the company or folks in the company or teams in the company where every quarter the inputs keep getting done, but the outcomes still don't happen, I think you've got to start questioning the level of input thinking also. So input focus is great. Input focus helps you sort of plan better for the outcome. But if you find, and there are certain people you will find where their inputs keep becoming green every single quarter, but the outcome doesn't sort of move, that's where, there is an issue in terms of even planning depth and thinking depth in terms of what inputs really are required to move the needle for a particular objective. So that's how you should look at. You should not sort of stop looking at outcomes. The whole purpose of looking at inputs is so that those inputs should help you drive better outcomes over a period of time. And that's what typically happens over a 2-3 quarter period. The follow-up question from Tarun, of course, is, was the OKR implemented across the org at the same time, or was it phased, Manish?
Tarun, we use the OKR process right now at our e-commerce org, which is purple.com. So for purple.com is fully pervasive till a certain level of leadership level. It was not done in phases. Actually, you can't really do it in phases in a firm, because if there are teams that are dependent on other teams to get their objectives met over the next quarter, then those teams also have to follow the same OKR process. So it's not like, you can follow the OKR process for the product and tech team, but don't follow it for the business teams or marketing teams or supply chain teams. As a founder or a CEO, your job is to deliver a certain outcome in terms of a P&L. And for that outcome to be delivered, you need 5 or 6 different parts in the company to be fully aligned on what we want to do. And as long as they are fully aligned, there is no reason of why they would not be using OKRs as a governance framework. Where we don't use it still is in one of our acquisitions, which is more recent one. We don't use it yet in Faces Canada, but we plan to use it there as well, because this is a governance framework that we absolutely like. But at Purple, there is no team that does not follow OKRs.
Thanks, Manish. Again, on this one, important point that Manish made, Tarun, one, please, when you launch OKRs, launch it across teams. Do not sort of launch it in one team or 2 teams only. That's important. But in terms of the levels of the organization to which you want to percolate it downwards, you can take a phased approach, which is saying that in quarter 1, you take it to the leadership team only, and quarter 2, maybe you open it up to 1 or 2 levels below them also. And by quarter 3, you take it down to the level of the org that you really want to take it down to. So that's the phased approach that you can take, but do not phase it out across teams. So all teams should be on the OKR process on day 1. We are running out of time, but there's one question, one or 2 more questions that we'll take. There's one question that I really like here. I know it's a little down the list, but here is the question. It's by Jane James. OKRs help bring focus, but what about BAU? For example, my CSAT is great, but my O2C isn't. I need the team to work on O2C, which becomes the focus, but CSAT is BAU. How does this come into business reviews? Outstanding.
What is O2C?
Order to contact ratios. These are typically, if you're a B2C company, for every 1,000 orders that you deliver, how many contacts are you getting?
Sorry, so could you just repeat the question? What is the question? Like, how do you use OKRs for BAUs?
The question is, what about BAUs? OKRs are fine for big initiatives, but there are BAU metrics also that are very important. And CSAT is one of those sort of BAU metrics that, might get impacted if you don't sort of put it on the OKR process, because it is a metric that is very critical to the org health. You can't really lose focus on it. That's the question.
So I think, as I said earlier, Neeraj, I don't differentiate between BAU and anything else. Everything is on the OKR. If the objective is, let's say your CSAT score in your customer service team is 95%, and you want to just increase it to 96% this quarter, just put it in OKR, and please write down the initiatives of how you will take it up. From what initiatives are you taking which will take it up by 1%. And if there are any things you're rolling out which might actually decrease the CSAT, please put that as well. So the net impact of the initiative should be plus 1% in CSAT score. So I would say anything, whether it's BAU or whether it's growth or any of that stuff. I mean, sometimes we put our OKRs as, keep the cost per order at X rupees. This is the cost of delivery to customers. And obviously at the beginning of the quarter, we predict that there are some things that could go wrong. And so that might have a negative impact on our cost per order. And there are also things that we are implementing to make sure that, our cost per order stays the same. So I would say every project, every part of the business, whether it's BAU or growth or whatever, 0 to 1, I would say there is a way to put it in the OKR, and you should absolutely do it in the OKR only. I don't think you should use any other governance framework. That's all what I'm trying to say. If you try to use different governance framework for different parts of the org, it just gets then, like too many things to look for. I mean, as a founder, what you want to do is, if your OKR review meeting is at 4:30 on Thursday, at 10 a.m. in the morning, please spend 2 hours looking at all the OKRs and making sure, then who's on track, who's not on track, and make sure that people have filled the OKR tool by Wednesday night. And for that to happen, people should have done their work-in check-ins on Tuesday. Yeah. And this process just needs to run every week and week and week and week. That's all.
Brilliant. Well said, Manish. Again, the point that Manish is making, which is very important to remember, that OKRs are not meant for only moonshot initiatives or moonshot ideas. OKRs are meant to be able to bring the focus back on everything that matters in a company, moonshot or not, and BAU is included in that. So Great point, Manish. Thank you so much. We are out of time now, guys, but we've shared a feedback link with you in the chat window. We'll be very, very grateful if you can please take 30 seconds out and fill that feedback form for us. It will go a long way in helping shape the future webinars. And Manish, I can't thank you enough for taking time out and joining us today. As always, it was a fantastic session and fantastic talking to you again, Manish.
Well, thanks, Neeraj. Absolutely pleasure being here. And, a quick shout out. I think Neeraj and Anusha have been personally involved in our OKR process. So a big thank you to them. And we are actually pretty, like I would say, decently, big believers in what xto10x does. So we use not just one, but probably 3 or 4 of their services today. So, can absolutely vouch for quality of stuff that you get from xto10x.
Thanks a ton. And thank you everybody for taking time out and joining us today. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.